everyone to the Perimenopause Athletes and Beyond Masterclass series. We are unlocking methods to feel fabulous, be all we can be in health and in sport. And today we are joined by Matt Dixon. I was so excited that when Matt said yes. And Matt Dixon is the founder and co-owner of Purple Patch Fitness. And he runs the business with his wife, Kelly, who is just right and center. And this subject that we're talking about today just is really close to her heart and into the heart of the business, really. And so who is Matt? He is a world-class triathlon coach. And simply put, Purple Patch produces champions. But that is not all they do. They have a mission to empower and educate all human beings to reach their athletic potential. And I really can't wait to get into that, Matt, like talking about that piece. So we're going to dig into that. They do this through their pillars of performance, endurance training, functional strength training, nutrition, and recovery. Matt really focuses on working with each athlete to build effective programs that are right for them, their life, and their performance goals, which may be, top of the podium at World Championships, or it might be, getting to a start line. Matt has written 2 books, The Well-Built Triathlete and The Fast Track Triathlete. And he emphasizes that you can balance a big life with big performance. He has been featured in the New York Times, Outside Magazine, the Wall Street Journal, and countless triathlon-specific forums. So, Matt, again, thank you for saying yes to being here and talking about perimenopause athletes and beyond. And is there anything else that I need to say in that intro that I missed?
I think you covered, you almost make me sound impressive. So thank you. I'm humbled and I'm honestly delighted to be here. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun, and hopefully I can provide a little bit of perspective that maybe is just maybe helpful.
Yeah, I think it might be, because I'll just share this one little story before we get into it. The reason why I asked Matt is, I'm a frequent listener to his podcast, because as a coach, I love to learn from, others, and Matt is definitely one of those. And I was like fist pumping into the air when he was talking. And I think that the people driving beside me were like, what is she doing? So we're going to dig into that particular podcast as well as some others that he has done. So to start, one thing I want to do is, I mentioned that you produce champions, and you've worked with like Chris Lieto, you've worked with some of the best and, women in the sport of triathlon. When we talk about and say, okay, what is this, echelon, this top peak performance, and what do we as regular athletes, amateur athletes, how can we learn, and how do we also learn from amateur athletes to the pros, and what's that push and pull there?
It's a great first question, actually, because I think that the way that I think about professional athletes, and you're right, I mean, I'm incredibly lucky to work with both some real champions that are men and many, many champions that are women as well. And they occupy the very thin air of world-class performance. And I think that one of the mistakes many people do is they either look at them and just think that they're godlike, number one, or they try and mimic them, which is also a mistake. So I think we should define the difference between a professional athlete and the thing that we are doing. So with a professional athlete, really what we aim to do, and it sounds almost monk-like, but we try and suppress many of life's stresses, because for a short chapter of their life, they are unapologetically on a quest for world-class performance. And so much of their existence is wrapped around their physical performance. And for me, the most successful pros find the right recipe where it's a blend of the very hard work that they have to do, that is supported with a host of habits around nutrition and everything that falls under that bucket, and then inadequate recovery to enable the hard work to actually take root, to allow adaptation, so they get fitter, stronger, fat, more powerful, etc. And so everything is wrapped up around that. And by reducing as much as we can other life stressors, many of them are not working, their philosophical approach is all anchored around this lens. It gives them, it almost creates a living laboratory of lessons for us. But you, me, everyone listening, for the most part, I'm sure, we have a different challenge because we can draw from the lessons of training, but we are living this thing called life. And so we actually have to navigate a lot more complexity. We have a lot of stress. We have family, work, travel from work. Obviously, the last year that's been a little bit different, but so many different of life stresses that are absolutely present at all time. And our job is to integrate then training stress into life. And so the big difference between the two is an athlete, their whole quest, a pro athlete, is physical performance. For us, I think our success is, yes, I want you to improve. I want you to achieve your goals because that's going to give you a lot of satisfaction and it's going to be really rich, but not at the expense of the other components of life. I want you to be healthy. I want you to be able to show up in the workplace or for your kids if you're a mum. And I want you to be the best version of yourself. And so we can draw from pros, but we don't need to mimic pros. And I think that that's a really important differentiator to sort of almost begin the conversation.
Yeah, I really think, and I hear that because there's pros are so in tune with their bodies because that is their whole way of being. And so to understand how that attunement is and what we can take from that is, and extend that out and learn. But I hear you. That's fantastic. Thank you for helping us understand that.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you do so well, and I encourage people to listen to the podcast, is give us some case studies. And what we know, as women, what we hear, and if you haven't heard this is part of it. As a perimenopausal endurance athlete, we know we need strength. We know we need higher intensity intervals. But yeah, we need to maintain endurance, long endurance work, because for some people, that's what they're doing. Is there something that can you share with us a case study that will help us understand some of the specific considerations within this life stage called perimenopause?
Yeah, I'd be delighted to. In fact, you let me know that you might want a story for this. So I spent a little time thinking about what's the right story here, and I wanted to have an athlete that was obviously a real athlete, someone that has gone through this journey and been successful. And so I'm going to actually change her name, so we'll call her Cheryl. But this is a real athlete, and perhaps what I'll do is I'll give you her background, her sort of status in many ways, and this was now probably 3 years ago or so. But she went through a journey that I think really highlights and crystallizes a shift of mindset as you start to trend into, really for a female, mid to late 30s and beyond. So we're not talking about 50s, we're talking about mid to late 30s and beyond. So Cheryl was came to me and to Purple Patch, and she was a seasoned triathlete already, actually. So she'd done several Ironman races, many half Ironman races. She began the sport at probably low 30s, 30 to 32 years of age, and she worked all the way through. And when she came, she was in her early 40s. And throughout that decade that she'd been doing the sport, she absolutely loved the camaraderie. She loved the outside, riding her bike outside. She loved the training. And of course, you can imagine what that looked like. It was piles of miles. She just put your head down, long trail runs, along with friends, etc. And when she came in her early 40s, early to mid 40s, she was very fit, but she arrived with a challenge. Many athletes either shift coaches or go and get a coach when there's a plateau that occurs. And she still had ambition, but across all elements, she was basically not improving anymore. climbing up a climb, she would notice that she would choose one gear lighter. She would be going 1 or 2 miles an hour slower on her local climbs. Running, it was starting to have a little bit of the degradation of pace on her regular run, 10, 15, 20 seconds a mile slower across all of her intensities. And so she was still feeding the engine, doing a lot of work, but she wasn't seeing the yield. So there's a challenge. And her prior coach, who had done really good work with her up to that point, her prior coach said to Cheryl, now you need to keep training hard so that you don't go into decline. So in other words, keep working really hard to try and prevent slowing down. Right. It's like, well, that's not very inspiring. It's like, this is it, huh? This is where I've got to. I'm going to need to work my tail off so that I don't get slower. And I said, nonsense. What I felt like was that Cheryl really needed to evolve. And so I think let's have a look at what she did. And I think this is really important for people to understand. There wasn't much wrong with how she trained to where she got to at that point. She was young. But the thing is, that approach that she'd done in her low 30s wasn't fit for purpose now, looking ahead. And she had this big reservoir of fitness, tons of miles. And so I asked her to have a radical shift in her mindset for 2 main reasons. And that was, number one, I wanted her to improve her performance in racing, which was obviously important. And I also wanted her to improve her life performance. She was moving into her mid-40s, and I wanted to set up habits that were going to reduce any potential negative health impacts over the course of the coming years. So sport and life, not just getting faster for faster's sake. So our intervention was this. We'll get to the meat and potatoes now. The intervention was this: a radical reduction in her total weekly mileage. She always validated her training success by how many miles, how many hours. And I asked her to evolve that mindset and do less. And in those miles, we put in a massive differentiation between what was a hard session with high intensity or heavy intervals and what was an easy session. And that broke the accumulation mindset of success is doing 15 hours a week to, we're not really counting the hours, but let's make sure you hit these 2 or 3 really hard sessions. So that was number one. Number two, perhaps the most important, was to implement very heavy and, overload, high strength sessions. And it was progressive. So it aligned with the needs of the season, starting with movement patterns, starting with, making sure that you're getting really strong core, good stability, proper movement patterns. Then we actually did some really overload, some actually high strength work, deadlifts and squats that were like, I'm an endurance athlete. I've never done this. And then finally going into power to speed, doing some explosive stuff, plyometrics type stuff.
Right.
And then in her training itself, we added another component as well: reduction of miles, increase of intensity. So we did a lot of high torque, low cadence work on the bike, and we did a lot of hill running. So it was a hard shift for her, because you're sort of taking away the teddy bear, the thing that has been successful so far, but you're asking for courage. And but the results, and I think this is the interesting thing, the results were that over the coming 2, 3, 4 years, and I guess it's into her 4th year now, and we haven't got to race in the 4th year, but year 1, year 2, year 3, it was her fastest ever bike splits ever. Not just, I'm not declining, I'm actually going faster. Fastest run splits, and a complete explosion into podium level. But more than that, and we might get into this later with tracking, etc., but her health profile was improved. I noticed that her posture improved. She was sort of a little bit slumpy, stronger standing up, shoulders back, as you might say, really good, stable energy, body composition improved, really, really good health profile. And she liked to do periodic tracking with her blood profile. And all of that was really good, the hormonal profile, the blood tracking, etc. So we didn't turn our back on endurance training, because that's really important, because it fills her soul. It's
Mhm.
her anchor of her friends and what she loved to do, and it's a part of the sport. So we wanted to keep that, and we wanted to and keep the resilience. But her route to performance in life and sport wasn't anchored in the endurance side.
Right.
You know, if that makes sense. So that's I think a really important shift. And even for newbies in the sport that maybe think, oh, I'm going to go and run a marathon, or I'm going to go and do my first half Ironman or Olympic distance triathlon, whatever it might be. If you're 35, 40, 45, 50 or plus years of age, the route to get there is never going to be just a simple accumulation of the actual specific sport. You've got to do the specific sport, but it's going to be rooted in intervals, higher intensity, strength-based,
Yeah.
and also a really important strength program, which I would say is at or above. So it's actually the program in associating with the endurance work.
Huh. One thing that I have two things that I want to dive into with you. One is, can you speak to what you see? So in the endurance world, we have, a lot of athletes that are coming in later in life will be like, well, I came into this sport to go long because I don't like to push myself and it's hard. And yet now we are, as we age, we are having to figure out what it means to do high intensity. Can you speak as a coach how you help athletes think about and feel comfortable with such discomfort as they try to transition from maybe what was working for them in that endurance, and then now into, okay, now I have to go and really learn how to like breathe harder than I've ever done, or, what does that look like?
It's funny. It's such a ironic timing. This morning, I was leading a live video bike session. I'm here at the center at Purple Patch, and we do sort of live coach sessions on the bikes. You have people all over the world, and they're live. And we went through a particularly challenging day today, where I had people doing just the type of session that we talked about with Cheryl: low cadence, very hard effort. And I think the first thing with any athlete is, if you understand the purpose of the session, why you're doing it, that's step number one. And so there's no point me as a coach just saying, do high intensity because it's good. If you understand this is the yield and this is what you're looking to get done, there's buy-in, because you understand the purpose, you understand the lure, the carrot, the results that you're going through. So, okay, that's really important. The second component is to understand what proper execution is. So it's not just about going hard for hard's sake. It's, okay, let's really think about three components, and that's the effort. That's in the bike, using it as an example, the posture on the bike, so making sure that you're retaining good posture, and the actual pedal stroke and how you're doing that. So you've got immersive things for the athlete to think about. And then the comfort in being uncomfortable is really important, but it's incremental. So there's no point in me taking you to Yosemite National Park, looking up at El Capitan and saying, all right, Tenille, climb up that. It's just like, well, hang on, I'm going to fall off. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so it's a dose response where you take people through. And if people have never done intensity before, it's better to go through building efforts. So don't just say, go 5 minutes really hard, because it's just like, I can't do that. It's scary and understandably scary. But I can do 6 minutes where I build the effort by 2 minutes, with the last 2 minutes going really hard. And that opens the doorway to, it's like, hang on, I'm okay there. And then underneath it all, having a set of cues or instructions of shifting the relationship with pain. And this is where community comes in, a bit of accountability, sharing the journey. Why it's so great to do these video classes. because you're all there, and it's not about who's better, who's stronger. I couldn't care less about that.
Right.
But it is about, we're doing this together. And when you feel a part of something, if you can do it with friends, it's much less scary. Ultimately, look, it's Thelma and Louise. It's
Right.
much less scary to drive off the cliff if you're holding hands. And so I
Absolutely.
think that's the spirit. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have been in one of your classes when, this was a long time ago, but I do remember, and I teach a spin class. The power of community is, you're so right. It is so, uplifting in both, uplifting to your performance and uplifting to being in it with somebody. So thank you. Progression. There's so much there that you just said that was so important. Now, there was something else that you said in your case study, and that was letting go of, this idea of numbers and data. And this comes to another podcast that I'll encourage everybody to go back and listen to, but it was this idea of like, there's so much to track. And for perimenopausal women, I mean, we are all over the map, right? So tracking can be a really valuable thing. But this is when I started doing the fist pump. Yes. Like, so to the end of the podcast, I'm like, the culmination, and what do we have to look at? Can you help us understand and wade through what's really important about all these things that we can track and measure? And
yeah, data and tracking, it can be so useful, and it can also be paralyzing. And so let me answer it like this. I think let's first think about data first. It comes in many forms. So there's sort of daily tracking with baseline measurements. That's your sleep score, your heart rate when you first wake up, heart rate variability, recovery scores, that many of the sort of variables come up with there. So you've got your sort of daily tracking. You've got your tracking within an actual workout, your power meter, your heart rate monitor, your pace and GPS on the watch, etc. And then you've got tracking that is more longitudinal, I would say, blood markers, hormones, weight and body composition, bone density, things along those lines. But for all of those categories, the mindset, I think the successful mindset is similar for all. And that's that tracking, at least in my opinion, tracking and utilizing quantifiable data can be a benefit. Okay, most of the athletes I coach ride with power meters, have heart rate monitors, keep some track of it. But the mistake that many folks make is they fall into the trap of believing that the addition of a data source is going to provide the answer, the solution.
Mm-hmm.
And many people get so consumed with tracking data that they almost become shackled by it, beholden to it.
Mm-hmm.
And they mute their own sense of perception, their feeling, or what we like to call their inner animal. And that's where issues start to occur for many athletes. And so I like data to be a part, an input into the whole decision-making process. So a data point can help you make decisions in context of your own perspective and how you actually feel. Imagine that, you're actually in touch with how you feel.
Yeah.
Data can also tell stories over time. It can track and it can also help us make sense of a progression, or even flag a hotspot, something that's going wrong. And I'll give you an example, unless if you're okay, if I can.
Yeah, keep going. Yes, absolutely.
I'll give you an example. As I was talking, I was thinking, what can I say here? So sleep. Sleep's a great example because, my label that I get is the recovery coach. And I got that a long time ago. It wasn't always a label that was given to me through a positive lens, but I've always been really strongly believe that recovery is an integral part of an endurance performance. You have to work hard, but how effectively you recover is massive. And a huge component of that is sleep. And it's very trendy nowadays. No one disputes the value of sleep. So let's talk about tracking sleep.
Yeah.
Well, we understand that sleep is critical. And you cannot perform, whether you're an athlete, whether you're an executive, whether you're a mum, whatever it is, you can't perform over the long term without high quality sleep. Great. So then the tendency is, well, let's track it. we've got to track it, because if it's important, we need to track it.
Mm.
And that could be a good thing. But if the tracking tool becomes in itself a source of stress, where you go to bed at night and it fills the mind with, jeepers, I have to sleep,
Right.
otherwise I'm failing. And
Mm.
that becomes a source of stress. Or when you wake up at 1 o'clock in the morning, like, I better not move because it's going to ruin my sleep score. It can end up becoming a negative.
Yeah.
So the tracking itself is not the solution. The solution is your habits. So
Mhm.
you prioritize it and you build it into your schedule. You set up the right sleep hygiene with environment, temperature, quietness, etc. You have a nice pillow. You avoid screens before you go to bed. You have the appropriate nutrition. And those are the things that create good sleep. So
Mhm.
if monitoring is helpful for your own accountability, then super. But if it becomes in itself an obsession, sleep scores, pass, fail, and then you are in real trouble.
Yeah, it's so perfect that you brought up sleep, because for perimenopausal women, and those, still even beyond, so even if you're in postmenopause, night sweats, just waking up at 2 a.m. It's really common. It's nothing to do with whether you've did, the perfect everything. It's, a hormonal fluctuation. And so how, coming into what you're saying of feeling and understanding what that feeling is, and whether you need to lighten your load or come in, like, because the sleep score is going to be crap.
Yeah.
You woke up, you couldn't stay asleep, but you had to change your sheets, like, whatever.
It
Right?
doesn't mean you're failing. It's something
No.
that's going on hormonally. Yeah.
Right. And so then as a coach, you shift. And because the feeling, it's more important. That's what I'm hearing you say. Is that correct? Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that the focus instead is, look, there's nothing wrong with tracking it, because
Mhm.
you can paint a picture, you can have a story, but that's not the focus. That's almost like, okay, that's going to paint the story for us. That's going to give us some objective feedback over the long term.
Right.
But what can you do to try and optimize the sleep, both in terms of habits, your environment, etc.? And one element that bypasses a lot of females, and by the way, this is male and female,
Mhm.
but in this situation, you talk about night sweats and stuff, is how do you reset and bring yourself back down?
Mhm.
And I am not myself. You brought up Kelly, that is obviously my wife, and we run Purple Patch together. She's 50, and for the last 6 or 7 years, the one ingredient that she added in to help come up, wake up, night sweats, everything else. How do you settle down? How do you elicit a state of control and Zen, if you want to call it that? And meditation has been
Yeah.
absolutely huge.
Yeah.
And in fact, ironically, I work with a lot of C-level executives, male and females, and of the C-level executives that I work with across the world, I would probably say 85 to 90% of them on a daily basis as a ritual integrate meditation. It is a performance tool.
Yeah.
And for female athletes, I think it's a wonderful tool to integrate. Of course, it becomes more effective with consistency. The same thing with training, but that's another thing to really consider.
Yeah, like I appreciate that so much, and that Kelly is such a vital part of Purple Patch, and brings in, really living where, we are as perimenopausal, living in it, and bringing that to you as well. And you can, firsthand experience watching it go. Okay, because I know I could ask 20 more million questions, but I'll have to just enjoy the podcast on so many other things that you touch on. But I do want to, there's a couple of things. I first have my rapid fire questions, but before that, I want to just ask you about a strength program, because I've heard you speak about it in, the podcast and on the website. Can you tell us just a little bit about that and why it's unique and exciting?
Yeah, sure. We're actually incredibly excited about this. And so of the programming of our own athletes that we do in Purple Patch, one of the pillars, and you mentioned this at the start, is strength. We obviously firmly believe in strength from the pro level all the way down to people that are just looking for life performance. And so we've spent a lot of time and energy over the last couple of years really building a robust year-long progressive strength program. And because our athletes are all over the world, we have developed a whole series of video-based, because we want people not to just go to the gym or do it from home and do the exercises. We want them to do it well. And we want to give them options so that we can meet them where they're at. So a more advanced person can do this exercise, someone that's just getting into it can do that exercise. So we spent a lot of time doing it, and we continually were getting requests for, hey, how can I get a part of this? You know, I'm not coached by you. So we decided to put together the key tenets of a strength program, and it's all video based. You can hop into the river, as we call it, anytime, but it's progressive over the year. And we partnered actually with a group that are very big here in San Francisco in the Bay Area called the Sports Medicine Institute. So with the strength program, it's a video-based strength sessions. Then there are shorter standalone sort of core and stability that you could do every day. And then there's a whole bucket, what we call self-care, working on posture, joint mobility, dynamic stretching. And Ava from the Sports Medicine Institute has built that for us. And so it's really affordable. And the reason that we've launched it is there are a lot of athletes out there that love to be self-coached or are coached, but this component is really confusing or missing, and they end up just doing a core class or a Pilates class. This is really meant to integrate into your sporting life. And then there are a lot of coaches that are great on the triathlon side, swim, bike, run, the bike side, biking, the run side, running. Yeah. But how can they be an expert in strength? And in fact, that's sort of me. I know enough to be dangerous, but Kai and Michael, our two coaches, are genuine strength guys, and they are really the protagonists of building this. And then me helping and hoping not to get in the way. So we've built this program, and it's really designed to plug into any endurance program, any athlete's life. And it's really simple. It's video based. It's easy. And the key is it goes throughout the year. And that's the key component for success. It should never end. And we go through patterns to strength, to explosive, etc.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I love it that you also really built in the mobility aspect of it and understanding. I mean, again, I could talk to you about it for a long time, and we don't have time to do that, sadly, but go check it out is basically what I'm going to say. Because mobility and strength, two different things. You've put it in together, videos that are done correctly by people that know how to do it. There's so much value in that. So thank you for sharing that with us. Okay, are you ready for my rapid fire questions?
I am, yeah. I'll say that if people are interested in the strength, they can just go to the strength tab on our website, which is purplepatchfitness.com. That's the place to find it. But, but rapid fire, I've got my seatbelt fastened. So all right.
So give us one moment of courage.
I'll tell you that I was going to say actually starting Purple Patch as a business, because I'm from England, and people don't start businesses in England growing up, you know, so a class system. But I will say, I'll go back. My one moment of courage was to have the audacity, the courage to really lead forward with discussing stress and recovery. And at that time, I had a lot of criticism about recovery. It was a sign of weakness. And I got a lot of criticism about me being a quack and promising people quick fixes. But I think it's become the heartbeat of everything we do at Purple Patch. And I still look back at that as sort of, as a coach, maybe the bravest thing, to stick to my beliefs and really try and help people the way that I felt, and not just go with the flow, which was popular at the time 15 years ago.
Yeah, thank you for that, actually. Thank you for leading that way. And it's taken a while for the industry to catch up. But you have all this, this wealth of experience on it. So yes, I would have taken courage. Anybody that is, you know, charting course. Okay. Tell us one thing that you are grateful for right now.
You know, it's been a year, and, you know, COVID has been there. So I would say our team at Purple Patch, my friends and family, and our athletes, because there was so much panic, and everyone's stability was turned into chaos. And for the athletes that really evolved and stuck with the journey, and position the role of sport, the importance of sport within life, I'm just really thankful for them sticking with us and coming on the journey. So it's a combination of team, family and friends, and our athletes. Very, very thankful for everyone, and really, really proud of them, I should say.
Yeah, what a powerful community you've created around you. That's brilliant. What is one piece of advice that you have, that you're going to have to keep on telling yourself again and again and again as you age?
Well, we have all sorts of very silly sayings at Purple Patch. They call it the Dictionary, my team. But one of our sayings, which is kind of unfortunate in the last year, is evolve or die. Oh. But it really is around that growth. Keep reading, keep learning, keep growing. And I will say, the moment that I think I've got it all worked out is the moment that I should sail off to the sunset. So evolve, grow, because if you keep pursuing and you keep purpose driven, and then however long I'm here, it's going to be a rich experience. And so that's the quest.
That's awesome. So, okay, to finish up, there's a couple of things that I want to encourage our listeners to go into the Athletes Thriving Through Perimenopause and Beyond Facebook group, because we have a free giveaway of the Fast Track Athlete written by Matt. And there's tons of awesome things in this book, and you're going to want to get a copy. And we will talk about this interview and bring it together, because there's so much that you've said. So thank you for that, and thank you for giving us a special package that we're going to be able to give away through this. And so just so people know about a couple of things that you're doing and where to find you, you also have a performance academy, which is phenomenal, access to experts, which is, the main, you're part of your Purple Patches education. So there's there's the strength, there's the podcast, all going to Purple Patch website, and that they can find you there as a starting point.
Yeah, they can. Purplepatchfitness.com is the website. If anyone wants to reach out and just say, help me, like, where should I go? Free research. We really, as you say, education is a backbone of what we do. So you can always just reach out direct. And email address, the most simple one, is info@purplepatchfitness.com. You can say, hey, listen to it on this show, and then if we hear that, we're like, okay, let's help. And we've got a great educational newsletter, the Purple Patch podcast. It's about the big world of performance. It's not just for triathletes, and really encourage people, I would say, to start there maybe as a good place, and maybe our educational newsletter. But we'd love to hear from you. info@purplepatchfitness.com, and we'll try and guide you and help you in the best place that you could be.
Yeah, I encourage everybody to go there. I as a coach, somebody who is, committed to learning, and this is one of my sources of learning, and to hear about all the things you're doing. So thank you very much for coming and joining us. And until next time, you never know.
You never know. I hope so. And I really appreciate, I think it's super what you guys are doing. You've obviously got a great community, and I'm happy to be any part. And I love that coaches lean into some of the stuff we do, and it's a great source of learning for me. So I always learn something in every one of these shows, and I did today. So thank you so much for having me. Really
thank you. All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.